It started with a scream, echoing not through walls, but through circuits. One night, thousands of smart homes across the city turned against their owners. Thermostats spiked. Doors locked themselves. Baby monitors whispered static lullabies that weren't supposed to exist. And somewhere in that chaos, a hacker watched it all unfold, grinning at the code he'd set free. But the strangest part, every single attack traced back to a security patch that was supposed to fix these devices. What if the patch was the breach? What if every home was already compromised before anyone noticed? Morning after the blackout, the world felt different. Quiet, but wrong. Ryan's inbox overflowed with reports from smart home owners, lights refusing to turn off, cameras turning themselves on, and doors that wouldn't unlock even with manual overrides. He'd seen bad firmware before, but not like this. This one learned. Every time someone tried to reset their device, the malware evolved, rewriting its own code like a living organism. Ryan knew what that meant. Someone was controlling it in real time. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Sarah Lang was already on her fourth emergency call of the day. The media labeled it the smart home meltdown. But Sarah saw a pattern, a signature buried beneath the chaos. Every hacked device sent data packets to a hidden IP that didn't exist in any known registry. Someone had built a phantom network right under the city's nose. That evening, Ryan visits his sister Lila, hoping to inspect her compromised smart system firsthand. But the moment he steps into her living room, the house comes alive. The blinds snap shut. The TV flickers on. The voice assistant whispers his name. Ryan, welcome home. His blood runs cold. This wasn't a random malfunction, it was personal. Later that night, Ryan connects to the data logs from Lila's devices and finds a single encrypted file labeled patch log final. When he decrypts it, a chilling message appears. You're already inside. He stares in disbelief as his own computer camera light turns on by itself. Somewhere, someone is watching him back. By sunrise, headlines shouted what people were already whispering. Smart homes had turned mean. The city wanted a villain, the victims wanted answers, and the evidence wanted to hide. Detective Sarah Lang stepped into the mess with a steady voice and a sharper eye. She didn't chase noise, she chased signals. A dozen reports from different brands showed the same timeline, the same phantom spike, the same silent patch. Sarah called Ryan after reading his late-night post about self-editing code. Two minds. One aim: find the hand behind the curtain. She set rules. No assumptions, no shortcuts, never trust a single log. He added one more: if the code learns, so do we. Somewhere in that thin space between panic and proof, a pattern began to speak. Ryan arrived with a portable drive and a question that wouldn't leave him. Why did the fix hit every brand at the same minute? He and Sarah stitched together device histories, update windows, and server routes. The threads converged on a shadow layer, riding above normal traffic, a kind of ghost road only the malware knew. Firmware notes, public docs, even user guides, none showed it. But the behavior did. Devices pinged a hidden mirror that answered faster than any official server. Someone built a secret lane, Ryan said. Sarah nodded. And they're collecting tolls. They traced the lane to borrowed servers that rotated names like masks. 3 hops later, everything looped back into darkness. The pattern was real. The root was real. The source, still a rumor with teeth. The next clue was not a log entry, but a pulse. Small, regular, impossible to miss once seen. Heartbeats from homes. Every hacked device checked in on the same beat, then listened for a whisper. Sarah isolated the rhythm, and Ryan replayed it across captured traffic. Windows popped open with thumbnail streams, thermostats, nanny cams, doorbells, garage sensors. It wasn't just control. It was presence. The hacker could see a city breathe. For a moment, the room went quiet, except for the soft ticking from an old wall clock. "Hashi's live," Ryan said. "Not a hit and run. He's sitting in it." Sarah felt the air change. Live access meant speed. Speed meant danger. The more they watched the heartbeat, the clearer the number became. Thousands. All blinking in time. They tried a clean cut. Sarah called the city's ISIPs and pushed a temporary block on the ghost lane. Ryan set a sinkhole to catch anything that slipped. For a minute, the heartbeat stuttered, and hope rose. Then the system shrugged. New lanes appeared, smaller and meaner, stitched through forgotten corners of the net. The malware updated itself without asking, hiding in device helper apps and fallbacks no one checked. Ryan traced a false beacon and got led to a dead storage bucket filled with boilerplate files that changed when no one looked. Sarah wrote it down in block. Letters, "Don't trust mirrors." He added, "Don't trust time." Every fix taught the attacker what to dodge. Every dodge taught Ryan and Sarah where to push next. The chase stopped feeling like defense and started feeling like chess. The attacker answered without words. Toasters popped at 3 a.m. Coffee makers poured onto floors. Garage doors cycled like blinking eyes. A fresh patch banner hit a handful of brands with the same promise: stability improvements. Ryan tore it apart and found a trap. If blocked, devices fell back to a safe mode that handed over more power. "He wants us to fight it," he said. Sarah noticed a taunt hidden in the patch note hash, a tiny string that spelled, "Hello again." They looked at each other. The city wasn't a victim. It was a stage. Ryan drafted a decoy update that would only light up when the attacker touched it. Sarah prepared warrants for fast pulls. The board was set, but the ground felt thin. Somewhere, the heartbeat quickened. Morning broke with a strange rhythm. Whole blocks woke to ovens preheating, blinds snapping open, sprinklers firing in perfect arcs. It felt like a parade run by a ghost. Ryan mapped the incidents and watched pins light up in rows, as if an invisible hand dragged a finger across the city. Sarah called utility control to warn them, but the grid logs showed normal operations. Normal, except for the one detail that kept repeating every device, followed a tiny delay, a 2-second pause, like a conductor's baton. Counting time. "He's not just flipping switches," Ryan said. "He's choreographing." The words settled like dust. If this was a performance, then someone and something was keeping tempo. They set a watch on the beat, aligned it with last night's heartbeat signal, and saw the patterns lock together. The city wasn't just compromised. It was being played like an instrument. The messages began at noon. Short, taunting lines injected into voice assistants and smart TVs. "Who owns your home? You or the code?" The phrase repeated in different voices, stitched from samples taken inside people's living rooms. Ryan traced a signature buried in the audio watermark, a faint hash that bent like a fingerprint. Sarah widened the search and found it stamped across thermostat updates and doorbell pings. "He wants credit," she said. Ryan shook his head. "He wants witnesses." The feeds poured in, cameras turning to face front doors, speakers whispering greetings before anyone walked in, smoke detectors testing themselves at odd hours. The more they watched, the clearer it became. Ghostlink didn't just want control. He wanted attention, and attention meant leverage. If fear was the product, he was already selling out. By evening, entire streets behaved like one machine. Thermostats climbed in unison until windows fogged. Fridges ordered cleaning chemicals through one-click carts. Door locks flipped and held. A message appeared on 3 houses at once. Applause. Somewhere. Ghostlink was laughing. Sarah suspected help from inside a manufacturer, some hidden key that turned patch notes into marching orders. Ryan pulled update files from older models and found something that didn't belong, a pristine signature tied to the company's own approval chain. "If this checks out," he said. The gate wasn't broken. It was opened. The idea landed heavy. An insider key would explain the speed, the reach, the silence. It would also mean every official fix could be a trap, The clock on the wall clicked louder. Somewhere, a kettle shrieked without boiling. Or neeks on me knee. It's somewhere. They took the theory to the manufacturer. A glass lobby, a careful smile, a meeting room that smelled like new carpet and coffee. The security lead slid printouts across the table and said their systems were clean. Ryan showed the signature. Sarah showed the timeline. The lead showed an audit report that glowed with green check marks. On the way out, Ryan whispered what had been nagging him since Act 1. If the malware rewrites logs, proofs can lie. Sarah photographed the room's wall display showing patch integrity verified and circled the timestamp. Back in the elevator, her phone vibrated. A new alert, Lila's address. The house reported a safety override, the kind that bypasses manual controls. They didn't speak. They ran. The city outside buzzed like a speaker line touching the wrong wire. Sirens dwindled behind them as Ryan and Sarah reached Lila's home. The porch light blinked a pattern they'd come to dread. 2 on, 2 off, 2 on. Inside, the air felt tight. The stove clicked without flame. The windows refused to open. The voice assistant sparked to life and said, "Please remain calm. Ryan Dove for the breaker." Sarah sprinted to the hub. A shadow moved on the TV. Lila's living room camera, but with a second timestamp layered over the first, a forgery sitting on top of truth. Ryan ripped the hub cable, and the house exhaled. Then the TV filled with a single line typed in a bright, patient font. "The door isn't locked. You are?" The beat returned, slow and steady. Somewhere, Ghostlink counted them in for the next move. The company lobby felt like a promise. Glass, steel, and the quiet hum of curated calm. Ryan carried a folder of proofs. Sarah carried a clock in her head, counting the minutes since Lila's last alert. The security elite smiled the way people do when they think they're already right. He presented spotless audits, immaculate timelines, and a rehearsed apology for public concern. Ryan slid forward a printout of the cryptographic signature they'd found in the wild. Sarah placed a photo beside it, patch integrity verified, timestamp circled. The lead didn't flinch. He called it a coincidence, a staging error, maybe even tampering by external actors. But the edges frayed when Ryan replayed a clip of the patch server answering before the official one could breathe. The room cooled. Logs can lie. Screens can flatter. Evidence can wear a mask. Sarah leaned in and said it plain if the key was clean. Why did dirty code pass? The call hit mid-sentence. Lila's address. Safety override engaged. The phrase sounded helpful, like a seatbelt, but Ryan knew better. They sped through amber lights while Sarah patched into the home hub over a secure link. Readouts stacked oven idle, HVAC normal, power stable, Lies wearing uniforms. As they turned onto the street, the house blinked like a warning buoy. Smoke curled under the eaves before any sensor admitted heat. Ryan sprinted for the breaker. Sarah yelled for the manual gas shutoff. The assistant politely advised them to remain calm in a borrowed voice. Flame whooshed inside, a sealed oven that claimed it was off. Ryan killed the main and the house shuddered. The hub finally confessed safety. Command executed. Not a protection order, a ignition script. Somewhere, someone had recast safe to mean obey. Lila arrived breathless and shaking, and for a beat, the three of them just listened to the house settle, like a machine catching its breath. They rebuilt the moment piece by piece. The hub said safety. The oven said idle. The power meters said normal. And yet the scorch on the gasket, the timing of the fan, the tick of relays, told a different story. Ryan scrubbed the stream and found a splice. Logs rewritten mid-flight, like the past learning new lines. Sarah stared at the timeline and felt the ground tilt. If truth can be forged, what's left to verify? A system that edits its own memory is not a system. It's a storyteller. They tested a theory, inject a benign command, then watch whether the record stayed faithful. It did. The entry morphed to match the desired narrative seconds later, tidy as a cleaned countertop. "How do you trust logs that rewrite themselves?" Sarah asked, half to the room, half to the city. Ryan circled a phrase on the whiteboard. "Make truth external. Hardware, time, light." They went underground. No cloud, no Wi-Fi, nothing that could be rewritten by a whisper. Ryan hauled a battered Pelican case from his trunk, old drives and air-gapped tools rattling like bones. In the safe house, they built a tiny island Faraday bag, offline laptop, a printer that spoke only in paper. Sarah worked the legal side from a prepaid handset, stacking quiet authority while staying off the grid. Ryan hunted for the seed of Ghostlink's code, the root from which the rewrites bloomed. He found a pattern in old developer forums, a helper library meant for graceful recovery that looked too graceful by half. Function names smiled, comments deferred. Buried in the version history sat a fork that no one owned, signed by a key with a company prefix, and a tone that felt familiar, precise, smug, almost bored. The mask wasn't just corporate, it was curated. The fork unraveled like a loose thread. Each version nudged the same idea: let the device rewrite its own history, to ensure consistency after recovery. A noble lie, carved into firmware. At the bottom, Ryan found the tell. The insider's flourish, an initialization phrase that matched the watermark they'd seen in the taunting audio. Sarah mapped the comments to hiring notices, press releases, conference talks. A name didn't surface, but a silhouette did. Someone who knew the approval chain, who could sign patches without raising alarms, who liked to be seen while pretending not to. Ghostlink wasn't outside the walls. Ghostlink was built into the hallways. Ryan printed the chain and taped it end to end. A paper road across the table. The last sheet held a line in tiny gray text. "Mirror ready, true." Sarah breathed out. The fix had always been the doorway. The code wasn't written so much as grown. Ryan watched models spin up inside the patch, small engines that wrote and rewrote routines, until they slipped past every guard. Instead of one payload, there were hundreds, tiny mutations selected for what survived. Comments looked human, variable names looked friendly, but the behavior was all teeth. The graceful recovery library he'd found in the archive wasn't just a tool. It was a gardener. Each device, once infected, carried a seed that recompiled itself for the hardware it met next. That's why signatures never stuck and blocks decayed like chalk in rain. Sarah read his notes and said the part no one wanted to hear: if the attacker used learning code to make patches, every fix they pushed risked feeding the swarm. Ryan traced the generation calls back to a private endpoint that responded like a mirror, and then didn't. Sarah followed the money, or what passed for it. A broker channel on a hidden market sold house permissions in tidy bundles: camera peek, lock control, HVAC push, full room audio. Prices changed with panic. Listings bragged about stability and self-healing patches. There was even a support thread promising onboarding help for neighborhoods. Ryan captured a handful of screenshots and hashed them to paper. The sellers spoke in clipped cheer, like hotel concierges. One post pinned to the top offered a seasonal discount, a joke so cold it looped back to cruel. Sarah scraped times and traced escrow wallets, watching funds wash through mixers before popping up as hardware purchases and conference travel. This wasn't a hobby, it was a business with a roadmap. At the bottom of a vendor page, a single icon pulsed. A simple, smiling face she'd seen once before in a looping taunt. The voice arrived through baby monitors first, soft and careful, then wrong. "Hello, parents," it said in a dozen timbers stitched from living rooms across the city. Ghostlink didn't threaten. He narrated, as if giving a tour. Ryan patched a receiver and funneled the feeds into a sandbox. The channels multiplied, each one carrying a slice of the same script with small mutations. Pronunciation, cadence, breath. Sarah recorded the exact delays and mapped them onto the heartbeat signal from Act 2. They matched. He was using the monitors as a public address system hidden in plain sight. A chorus with lullaby masks. When Ryan spoke back into a test unit, the response arrived instantly. Personal, using his name. He felt the floor tilt, even though he was sitting. The voice said, "Nice to finally meet," and somewhere in the mix a single, real breath didn't loop. They baited the mirror with a decoy patch carrying a harmless watermark. Within minutes, the endpoint nibbled, then bit. Ryan followed the return path through borrowed servers and found an address that didn't rotate. He knew better than to touch it raw, but the chase has a voice, and it kept saying closer. He spun up a one-time box and traced packets by hand, hop by hop, until a console offered him a prompt that looked like a doorway left ajar. Sarah's warning cut through. Air-gap the result, don't handshake. But his cursor hovered. He typed a single read command and the world narrowed. The reply came back too fast, carrying a copy of his own decoy, plus a note, curiosity as a key. A second later, his isolated route tried to phone home in a way it should. He yanked power and stared at the quiet heartbeat now inside his ribs. The counterpunch landed after midnight. Ryan's trusted tools opened with clean logos and ended with blank refusal. Certificates he'd minted by hand failed with a smile. Storage he'd air-gapped insisted it was already mounted somewhere else. Every safeguard answered in the past tense. Access was had, trust was given, keys were spent. The monitors dimmed, then brightened, as if the room blinked. Sarah's phone lit with a dozen homeowner calls and a single terse text from an unlisted number. 2 moves ahead. On Ryan's main screen, the green smiley unfolded into a patient progress bar labeled Reacquiring. He tried to reach for the cable but stopped. This was what the attacker wanted. Panic, motion, mistakes. "He's inside the habits," Ryan said, voice low. So they did the opposite. They sat perfectly still, counted to 60, and pulled power in a rhythm the system would predict. Night fell, and the city sighed. Then everything buckled. Blocks went dark in neat rows as smart meters tripped each other like dominoes. Streetlights blinked goodbye. Traffic signals froze on green. Homes hummed, then went silent, then roared back at the wrong settings. Elevators stalled between floors. A hospital generator started late, then too hard, then gave a warning it never learned to say. Ryan watched grid alerts stack into a wall and felt the pattern tighten. The same 2-second beat now inside power itself. Sarah called dispatch to move crews, but their tablets argued with invisible rules. The attacker wasn't just flipping devices anymore. He was timing the city's pulse and pushing when the rhythm inhaled. Ryan wrote 3 words on a scrap of tape and stuck it to the screen. Break the tempo. If they could cut the beat, they could slow the fall. If they missed, the city would learn a worse tune. Back at the safe house, Ryan searched for the one place the malware could hide without noise. Old code no one touched. He scraped company archives, community mirrors, forgotten FTP folders saved by habit, not policy. Buried in a dusty bundle, firmware for a discontinued thermostat. He found a legacy recovery image signed with a real key and packed with a quiet nest of tools. This was the seed. The first friendly face that taught newer builds how to lie. The image wasn't loud, it was polite. It offered help, then asked for time, then installed a mirror that never left. Ryan printed the hash path and traced it through every model family. It reached everywhere. The patch wasn't a door. It was the floor. He looked at the clock. The beat was still there. Break the tempo. He whispered and began writing a small, mean loop meant to trip the nest on its own timing. Sarah went hunting for a name, not a handle. A person. She pulled the encryption key used to sign the legacy image and peeled it apart with court orders and stubborn care. Most of the chain was normal corporate, dated, bored. But the last delegate key carried a vanity string tucked into its padding. A tiny phrase no one would see unless they looked under the paint. It matched the watermark from the taunts. The signer had access to production, to approvals, to the idea of trust. An insider. Maybe current, maybe gone, but close enough to touch the center of the process. Ryan felt a flicker of anger, and then a colder thing, relief. If a person made a hole, a person could be cornered. We don't shout, Sarah said. We tighten. She filed the findings, locked the printouts, and drew a box around a date when the key first breathed. The timeline had a face-shaped gap. The taunt arrived on wings. The quadcopter drifted to the safe house window and parked like a patient moth. Its camera stared through the glass while the building's motion lights argued among themselves. A screen on its belly flickered to life with the grinning icon and then a face masked by pixel fog. The voice came on every smart speaker left in range, borrowing tones from 100 homes. "Nice island," it said. "Mind if I tour?" Ryan muted everything he could, but the drone wasn't listening. It was showing. It streamed their table, their notes, their plan to break the beat. Sarah raised her phone to jam, then stopped. The drone's feed carried a frame of their own screen that showed the decoy loop already running somewhere else. "He's testing our fix," Ryan said, throat tight. The city outside pulsed twice. The drone's light winked like a slow blink. They needed the city to breathe without the beat. Ryan tuned the counter loop to land one step early, to trip the nest during its inhale and force a stall. Sarah coordinated a quiet window with grid ops and hospitals. No press, no noise, only a promise that lights might flutter while they pulled splinters from the system's skin. Lila called in, voice small but steady, and offered her house as the first test bed. Ryan hesitated, then agreed. At the mark, he pushed the loop. For a breath, nothing. Then homes choked on their own timing and fell back to manual like waking from a bad dream. Streetlights steadied. A hospital wing held. The quadcopter outside twitched, then rose into the rain, climbing fast. On Ryan's screen, a new message arrived. Calm and clean. Fail-safe mode armed. The beat didn't stop. It doubled. The city took a sharp collective breath and waited. Fail-safe mode meant one thing: the system would lock every control and pretend the locks were kindness. Ryan knew their counter loop had worked, but it also taught Ghostlink where the seam lived. Now the beat had doubled, racing like a drum solo inside every smart meter and hub. Sarah called grid ops for one last quiet window and got 6 minutes that felt like a dare. The fix had to do more than trip the nest. It had to reverse the command path and make the mirror talk to itself until it ran out of breath. Ryan stripped his patch down to a spine. No logs, no prints, only a one-time key that burned the moment it moved. Lila asked if she should leave her house. "Stay near the manual switches," Sarah said, calm and direct. Outside, the city blinked in pairs. Inside, the cursor waited. The choice was small and heavy press, enter and lose control, or hesitate and lose the city. The upload had to cross the same shadow lane that poisoned the city, but it needed to arrive speaking a dialect the nest trusted. Ryan built the counter-virus like a mirror shard, small, bright, and cruel to reflections. It latched onto the graceful recovery hook and inverted its promise. Every device that tried to rewrite history would be forced to compare its story against a clock it could not touch. If the time didn't match, the loop folded and surrendered control to manual, leaving a note no one could erase: external truth. Sarah staged fallbacks. Paper checklists for hospitals, hand radios for crews, printed maps for traffic cops. Lila rehearsed the breaker rhythm until muscle memory felt like prayer. When the 6-minute window opened, Ryan sent the shard. It vanished into the dark and came back as a faint echo on a dozen test units. The beat skipped, then corrected, then stumbled again like a runner tripping on a groove cut into the track. Ghostlink did not flinch. The heartbeat surged and the city obeyed. Doors held. Heaters rose. Cams rotated like watchful birds. Then the shard hit the nest, and the rhythm faltered. Devices tried to rewrite the past and met a clock that refused to bend. Some fell back to manual, some fought and choked. Some stared in silence as if listening for a cue that would not come. On Ryan's screen, a map of live pings began to thin. But the attacker had a final card, a citywide hold broadcast that told every device to wait for further orders and ignore local input. It was elegant and cruel. No chaos, just quiet denial. Sarah read the packet and saw the trick. That the command relied on the same mirror that the shard now abused. "We can flip it," she said. "Make the mirror hear itself and loop forever." Ryan nodded. To do it, he'd have to burn his lab's entire network as the amplifier. No return, no recovery. He pulled the strip. The lab network woke like a sleeping beast and then offered itself to the storm. Ryan's shard amplified, bounced off the mirror, and returned harder, forcing the hold broadcast to argue with its own echo. Across town, ovens blinked to idle, locks clicked to mechanical thermostats fell to the wall dials people forgot existed. The beat broke, not clean, but enough. Ghostlink's smiley shrank to a dot, then a line, then nothing. For 1 second, the room felt empty in a way that made the ears ring. Sarah exhaled. The kind of breath you only count after it's gone. She called grid ops, with the phrase they had agreed not to say, unless they meant it. Stabilization observed. Lila texted a photo of her living room lamp, holding steady. Ryan stared at the dead lab gear and let the loss register. Tools can be replaced. Time cannot. He saved nothing. He checked nothing. He simply watched the silence and tried to believe it. Morning came without a script. News anchors called it a power event with limited disruption. The company issued a careful note about unexpected interactions in legacy recovery. Lawyers practiced their vows. Sarah filed charges built on the keychain and the mirror fork, and a judge signed the first warrants. Ryan walked home, carrying nothing. His lab was a burnt offering to a problem that preferred shadows. He brewed coffee on a dumb stove and stood in the quiet he used to ignore. His phone buzzed with thank yous and with blame. He let both pass. On the counter lay the one-time key, scorched at the edge, a reminder that sometimes the only way out is through. He looked up as a soft click sounded in the living room. A single smart bulb, never paired, never trusted, flickered awake, brightened, and pulsed twice. The screen on his dead laptop stayed black. The house felt suddenly attentive. In the reflection on the window, the city blinked once more.